Hello, everyone. It's Jerry at the Fledge. Welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. And today on the show, we've got our great friend Tobias. How you doing, man?
Happy to be with you, Jerry.
I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm just gonna start out real quick and describe myself to everyone. I've got brown hair, brown eyes. I've got a headset on. I'm up in my office at the Fledge. I'm wearing my Every Day is Trash Day somewhere. So shout out to all my skaters out there. And I got a big smile on my face because you're here today. So, what you been up to?
Yeah, let me describe myself real quick.
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sitting in my room. Behind me is a tall bookshelf. I'm wearing a knit hat with purple and blue stripes that my grandmother made me, concealing a less than great hair day. A somewhat long face, slightly in need of a shave, a worn t-shirt, and a newish gray hoodie is what I'm wearing.
And you're looking great, man. You're looking great. So I used to shave every day, almost religiously until COVID happened. Now I'm at about every other day, and on those off days, my mask sticks to my beard and
Yeah,
all this
yeah, you're
fuzz, and
like
I
me.
hate it.
Yeah, I always feel better with a completely shaven face, but how often my depression lets me bust out the razor is not. It's better
That
with the weather clearing though. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was about to say it's like 70 degrees out. Not quite, but it feels good out right now.
Yeah,
Makes me want to garden.
yeah. I'm about to come hang out outside at the Pledge. I love doing that.
Yeah, we'll open up that table pretty soon. We'll all be sitting around, having fun, being safe.
Yep, yep. Back
So,
to something like what it used to be. But
so, oh, go ahead.
yeah, good to start answering your question. What I've been up to. Mostly it's just grinding for the Poor People's Campaign. The local.
Well, everyone skips my first question.
Oh, what was it?
Tell us about you.
Oh, okay. Word.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm queer, young, activist people. Um, a leftist, a socialist. Someone who uh, cares cares generally a lot about the city, about the state of Michigan. Um, and yeah,
Well,
I've got brought into movement work by way of.
where were you born and raised? Were you born in the city?
No, I was born in Mason, very waspy area, um, 10 or 15 miles south of Lansing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Did you go to Mason High School and all that
yep,
and
yep,
graduated?
all of that. Yep. I did okay at Mason High School. By the end of it, I was, um, I don't know, not pleased with the education that I had got and like starting to realize some of the faults. And so I kind of gave up on it after a certain point. Um,
Yeah.
but there were some
Well,
good things about that school.
yeah. I think they're one of the few schools that maybe still has skilled trades, or maybe that's there's another school in Mason that's probably more recent than you, that focuses on different things that kids want to do. Like
There's
it's kind of an alternative.
there's the career center um,
Okay.
in Mason, and that's great. I did one of their programs my senior year, um, and yeah, that's a good way to go actually. And
Yeah.
you can come from Lansing, you can come from any of the local schools to do that. And there's busing, and if you drive your own car, you can get reimbursed for gas and stuff.
Oh,
The
nice.
number of programs they have is great, like automotive, construction, uh, design, all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah. Is it okay if I don't trust people who got straight A's in high school?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's like after at a certain point, all it is how well you fit into a system that is historically geared towards white capitalists.
Yeah.
So if you really fit that bill, you definitely have some unlearning to do, which
So
I don't fit that bill, and I had a lot of unlearning to do after
yeah.
growing up in Mason, for sure.
I don't want to age you if you don't want that, but when did you graduate from there?
2014, which makes me 25.
All right. So 7 years after graduating, what you been doing there? What are some of the things?
Well, I started with community college, not knowing what I was gonna do. My Like I said earlier, critiquing my experience in education was one of the more fulfilling things I had done at that point. So I was looking at education as a place that maybe I could do fulfilling work.
Yeah.
And I tried a program called City Year, which is an AmeriCorps program. It's not a good program. It's like, let's take mostly privileged white kids that have graduated 4 years of a college like MSU, and then put them into some of the worst schools in Detroit as mentors. Um, and
And what? Yeah. What made that like fall apart for you?
oh, it was the program was interesting. They did a decent amount to try and like teach, like we had to learn a lot of shit to not be racists in the Detroit school system. So they had some good education up front, but mostly I was able to learn from some of the people that like me weren't necessarily as privileged but made it into that space.
Yeah.
And I had a group of mostly queer people that we were really good at working together, and kind of, we were in that school in the space that really needed our help, but having to work through City Year, which was a program that made our help not as useful as it could potentially be.
Mm, yeah.
So we did a lot of working around City Year to do good things. It was Brenda Scott Academy on the east side of Detroit. Is where I was working, and that was the year that Trump was elected. That was a really tough year.
Yeah.
Um,
So that must have been good for you and for them. Do you get a lot out of that? What's
yeah, I
any
mean,
epiphanies?
well, my thing is always like, the academics of school only go so far. You're only teaching so much abilities, right?
Yeah.
So my thing was getting out of the classroom. Like I was supposed to be spending all of my time tutoring fifth graders in English. And I was supposed to focus on a really specific section of fifth graders, not the ones that were um, 3 to 5 grade levels behind, the ones that were
Yeah.
2 grade levels and 1 grade level behind. So that was pretty stupid and unrealistic of a thing to ask of someone that as compassionate with kids as me. Um, so
Yeah.
what happened? Excuse me. Is I was working mostly with the kids that got put out into the hallway, um, which my wing was third through fifth grade, which at the time had a lot of kids that had rough stuff going on at home. And so they'd come into school and be cutting up, and there'd be secondhand trauma to all the other students, to the point where a teacher would just be like, "Out, you got to go. You're harming the
Yeah.
classroom and the other students." Um, and the person who on my floor, the behavior specialist who was supposed to deal with that, didn't really have anything constructive. He was just like punishing
Yeah.
kids. So I started taking him down to the library, which wasn't really a library. It was just a media center with books. Um, and I started making that into a library with the students that were, um, well, essentially with some of the students that were, you know, a, I want to say above the content that was being taught. But you know, the students that weren't getting anything out of it on both ends of the spectrum, just being bored or just not being able to engage, and then, you know, feeling embarrassed and lashing out.
Yeah.
And putting those kids together in a situation where they actually were doing, you know, something positive for the rest of the school, for their community, really brought something out in the kids that regular class wasn't even coming close to. And it made them problem solve and actually think. So I leaned into that big, and my other city year people really did a lot of work just covering for me with the actual city year business, you know.
Yeah. It's amazing the genius you can find in poverty, the genius that these kids have. They're like, I don't want to hear that. I got this. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm studying. And if that would have been, you know, something in a lab in Okemos, everyone would have rallied around them. There'd be headlines in the newspaper. But if it's somebody acting out against, this is bullshit, I don't need to, I mean, this is not, I can get more out of YouTube than I can out of this class. I want to work on this. Then they get punished in the inner city. They get punished in the poor neighborhoods.
Yep, and a lot of that stems from you know, racism from the teachers. I don't know any of those kids at Brenda Scott that hadn't had at least one teacher along their span that was, you know, had some like microaggressions all the time.
Yeah.
The teacher that I was supposed to work with, the 5th grade English teacher, was terrible.
Yeah,
and
let's call her out. No, I'm just kidding.
that was one of the other really negative things about city years, is when the teachers were like abusing the kids, we were not allowed to go to any school administrators or anything. Like, that was part of the deal that is written between the DPSCD and city year.
So they cut your tongue out right at the beginning, huh?
Yeah. So the best thing I could do was just make it so I was pulling kids out of her classroom a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I doubled down on the library. I during the winter, I prepared. I knew I wanted to run the garden at the school, which nobody had messed with in a while. So yeah, I just started pulling kids out, not to just to engage with things that they would actually engage with. You really have to meet kids where they're at.
Yeah.
And not enough teachers are actually prepared to do that. Especially white teachers in a school. You know, that school had 97% black kids and 3% Hmong kids. There were like 2 mixed kids. There wasn't a single white kid in that school.
Yeah. So do you think that's part of what motivated? So we got Mason, we've got what you were doing with City Life. Is that what got you into the Poor People's Campaign?
Ultimately, yeah. I started doing activism work with a climate movement. I was working with Extinction Rebellion.
Oh yeah,
because the climate crisis is real, and it's tied into all these poor issues, and it's affecting poor and black people first. And Extinction Rebellion is one of at least the U.S. branch of the Extinction Rebellion, because it's an international group. It is very like focused on uplifting black and poor people and the other people that it's affecting first. Indigenous people. So getting into that's kind of where I got into activism work. But then that's my whole focus is that kind of work, less the climate stuff. So when LaShawn started the Lansing branch of the Poor People's Campaign, I had seen them at like the first really big protest I ever did was in Chicago. A couple years ago now. So yeah, I had that was where I first ran into the Poor People's Campaign, was on the streets, which is always, you know, that gives you a good feeling about it, or it gives me a good feeling about a movement.
I don't think I ever ran into the United Way on the streets. Sorry, I don't want to bash the
Yeah, no, I
Way.
don't
I'm
even
not
know.
saying
I
that,
don't even know
but
who the United Way is.
oh, even better.
So I mean, and that, you know, and I'm young people. Young people are moved by people being out on the streets. Whether it's logical or not, it doesn't even matter, because movements are, you know, movements, like emotions matter in movements.
Yeah. So for anybody out there that's listening or watching that doesn't know the Poor People's Campaign, can you give us a brief history?
Yeah, I'm not as good as some of the other cats. Like, we have some cats in our local branch who were part of the original one, because it dates back to, I don't even know the year. Again, I'm the I'm the wrong person out of the group to be asking this, but this is a movement that was started by MLK, and it has to do with the intersectionality of all issues, like the racism, and poverty, climate destruction. All of these things are extremely tied, and uh, it's not going to work to address one without the other.
Right.
So it's really, um, about, it's a fusion movement, and it's about combining the issues of all these other groups, as part of a mass movement to try and make change, both socially and in legislation, and physically, you know, trying to build spaces like the Fledge, like what you got going,
You
and
know,
just trying to tackle all of the things, and
yeah,
talk to all the people.
it's a system thinking approach to poverty, and you know the Poor People's Campaign. When I read about it the first time, I was like, "This is everything I've ever wanted to be. It's everything I've ever wanted the Fledge to be."
The first conversation we had was like, "Hey, I'm Tobias. I'm with the Poor People's Campaign," and you were like, "Oh, this is my space. I've been trying to get y'all into this space. I'm so glad you're here." Like, I very distinctly remember that.
It was so exciting. I think we had only messaged with the Extinction Rebellion, so we didn't really know each other yet. And then you showed up as the Poor People Campaign. I
Yeah.
wanted to give you the biggest hug ever.
Yep.
I got to yell at Alexis real quick, but
Oh yeah.
tell us a little more about the Poor People's Campaign while I'm doing that.
Okay. Um, yeah. So the Poor People's Campaign. I'm just going to talk about the local and the state
Yeah,
group,
yeah,
because that's what I know. um, our local group, is pretty active, um, mostly in housing and in policy right now. Um, Housing largely because we've got, uh, people that are coming to us being like, these are unsafe living conditions, and we've gone to so many other people. You know, our building manager doesn't give a shit. The city council doesn't give a shit. Like, somebody has to care at the end of the day.
yeah,
Um, and so if it falls to the movements in Lansing. I mean, I know the Lansing Tenants Union deals with this too. We don't have any support really from the city. We're working on writing grants and stuff to get funding so that we can start buying buildings, and you know, physically make a difference. Like we've talked about, getting the homeless people off the streets of Lansing should not be that difficult. There's
right.
some real unnecessary roadblocks going on, and if we're able to build a little bit of power, we can circumvent them. Um,
Yeah,
so that's something we're constantly working on. We can always use help in that area. If you want to advocate on city council, if you want to come and help us write grants or recommend places to, you know, ask for fundraising and present our grants. Housing is always an avenue that you can come, meet with us and start working to help Lansing.
Well, what, well, first of all, Pastor Knox says, Tobias, I do that every time. Tobias, represent forward together.
Yep, not one step
So
back. That's the.
I've butchered your name a million times. I apologize for it. I'm going to keep doing it. I
It's
don't
all
know
good.
why I do it. Um, every time
I make that joke sometimes. I say white people call me Tobias.
I do. I'm damn it. This
That's okay,
interview's
Jake.
over. Oh wait, no, I'm the interviewer. You're supposed to do that. Um, so Pastor Knox, he's part of the Poor People's Campaign.
Yeah, Pastor Knox is always moving. You know, he's like me. It's always just like in his brain, but he's even better than me at like keeping his mental health together and just keeping on chugging all the time. He got a whole family too. Like one of the most commendable people I know is Pastor DJ Knox. Like he cares more about the all the people of Lansing than anyone on that city council. Definitely the mayor. You know, it's like, and he's actually doing their jobs and not getting anything for it, which or support from the city, which is ridiculous.
Since he's watching, we can't talk too much about him because he's got to come on the show. He still has to reschedule with him.
Yeah, LaShawn too, right?
Yep, both of them. Yep. But they had more important things to do both those days. You guys did. You just recently did an event. Was it last week, last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago?
Yeah, last Friday, I think. With
10 days ago.
Yep, Heather Hewlon was in town to deal with some of the stuff, that her brother left behind. And yeah, it was good to have some community. It was a bit warmer than the last car caravan that we did in January.
Yeah.
And honestly, just like that's just someone, because a lot of what the Poor People's Campaign is like, hey, we're poor people. I'm poor people. I have serious struggles with poverty and have since my youth. But because I'm in the Poor People's Campaign, I'm surrounded by people that are working to empower me, despite that, So a lot of what we do is taking in people and hearing their story and empathizing and then working together. It's pretty simple. But in the case of Heather Hewlon, like when she came in, like her story is heavy, and it's heavy that we weren't fighting for Anthony Hewlon this whole time when we were out in the summer fighting for George Floyd. And it's heavy the way that when it did come out, we were like, all the local movements were really bogged down in national politics because of, scary white supremacy. I organized every poll in Lansing had somebody with the Poor People's Campaign driving by it, making sure there weren't white supremacists every 10 minutes or so.
Would you mind just to record it and to tell everyone that might be watching from Dubai or whatever? Tell us about Anthony and what happened to Anthony, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So if you don't know, in April of 2020, Anthony Hewlon had a dispute with the neighbor, arguing, yelling, like some shoving maybe. At any rate, somebody called the cops, probably a neighbor. So he was brought in for that, and then he went to the hospital because he told the officers that he had meth in his system from the day before, and he was starting to get like sweats and kind of shakes and convulsions, and so they took him to the hospital, and they found that he did have meth that was laced, I think, with ecstasy in his system, and so he still had those twitches. They gave him some more like paralytic medication, but it didn't seem to do much from him, at least. And then what we have is the video of him being brought into the into the jail, still with those convulsions that were clearly like not, he wasn't trying to, wiggle out. He wasn't trying to get out of the situation he was in at all. But seemingly because of those small movements, the police pinned him to the ground. 3 of them on him, 1 sergeant just watching as they pinned him until he was asphyxiated, in the same way as George Floyd. And then they covered it up. They didn't.
And one quick thing, that was in a cell, right?
Yes.
They could have shut the door and let him be.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, and then the story that came out on the news was a man dies in jail due to health complications. Which was not the case, obviously. Eventually, Heather Hewlon's lawyers, while trying to figure out what happened, because their brother's body came back to them bruised terribly. Like, I've seen the pictures, and it's it's gruesome. They punched him in the face several times while he was down. Yeah. And the city had no response to to any of the family at all, and just tried to cover it up. Heather Hewlon's lawyer got that footage from the city coroner, and she shared it at the end of October, I want to say. Yeah, so that's how that went down. Yeah, when she was able to come out last week, just to have everybody with their signs with the justice for Anthony Hewlon. Anthony Hewlon was innocent, didn't deserve to die. Fuck the police. And just going and honking our horns at City Hall, driving around was part of that action. And it was just nice to see Heather Hewlon smile. Because every time we talk to her, it's really heavy.
Yeah. So a bunch of big mistakes here. Number one, we probably shouldn't have put more, what I think they call it special ketamine. Is that what they used in the hospital with him?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But it's something similar to like that, which is like Elijah, right? The young, very kind young gentleman.
Yeah.
They hit him with ketamine. So we give them a drug, and then we beat them, oppress them, brutally, whatever. And we could have left. What would he have done in the cell if they just left him alone, agitated? Maybe calmed down. Maybe went to sleep.
He'd have been fine, which is how that's supposed to go. Like he should have been fine.
And what would have been wrong with, hey, quit fighting, guys. Go back in your houses. We'll check on you tomorrow. I don't know why he got arrested, because he admitted
that's another mistake.
And I don't know. It's so frustrating.
There's problems with Lansing that probably contributed to him having that bad, and he's not like a regular meth user. He had been on some hard times probably for a few months, and that shit happened. It happens to a lot of people.
We're all trying to fill a gap with something, whether it's alcohol or depression or violence or drugs or overworking, overeating, all kinds of things. We're all on a journey.
Right.
What, let's switch topics if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
And what are some of the other things the Poor People Campaign, what are some other things you guys are working on? Anything big you want to announce? Anything you want to promote?
I'm building up. I don't think anything big, but we're just always steady building. If you're poor people that want to help other poor people, we're here. I'm one of those people that just tries to connect to everybody. That's my main job for the local Poor People's Campaign, is just talking to individuals. Which I should say, that's I'm gonna answer your question right now. What do I do every damn day? I just talk to individuals about revolution and whatever. I'm connected with a lot of groups because the Poor People's Campaign can't do it alone, and we're not trying to reinvent the wheel where there's already good movements doing the work.
Yeah.
So I'm always just connecting people with the movement. It makes sense for them to join. So if you have questions or inspiration, like I said, that's my job. That's my main thing is working for the Poor People's Campaign and doing just that.
I since you screwed up my whole run of show and now I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I just want to say something to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I told you this a couple weeks ago when I heard you speak at City Council in the public comments, and you are you every time I see you. I never see, red Tobias and blue Tobias and this other Tobias, and you don't play
Yeah.
you don't show up. All right, I'm gonna wear a suit today so that I can get the judge's respect or
Right.
whatever, and I'm gonna do this the next day.
Yeah.
You just do you, man, and I love it. I love it so much. You're impressive with how well I think you represent yourself and how authentic you are.
I appreciate that because
Since day one.
yeah, I try to be comfortable. It's not that's not always been an easy thing. Again, growing up in a queer person in Waspville over in Mason.
Yeah.
It's not always been easy to you know I guess just be myself. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that compliment because that's
Well, speaking of yourself, we've talked about you being an activist, but you're a musician, you're an artist, I imagine you have family. I imagine you have a bunch of friends. Um, I know you do, actually. So
yeah
tell us a little bit about your art or your music or
yeah
your
yeah.
whatever.
As a human being, I'll say this: growing up in Mason, there were like you know 5 black people in my grade at any given point. Um, but in the first year of high school, one of them was my foster brother. We were very close
Mm.
since growing up, and he had a situation where his Ma Dukes moved in to the west side of Detroit, and he was doing freshman year at Henry Ford High School. And before that year, I honestly didn't know anything about black people. Out of my family members, um, my uncle James is my only blood relative who's black, and he just fishes all the time. He's so I didn't know nothing. Um, my my foster brother from Mason, he didn't know nothing because he grew up in Mason too, and there's no black culture in Mason. And then he moved to Detroit, where that's like a mecca of black culture in the United States. But he wasn't ready for that, nor was he ready for Henry Ford High School, which out of the high schools in Detroit is one where a lot of fights break out. It's less a school where kids are getting arrested for weed all the time. It's more like big fights erupt pretty regularly at Henry Ford, and the gangs are recruiting there and stuff. Like that's the reality that he had to come into after having grown up all in Waspville suburb, small town, Mason, Michigan. So
Waspville is white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, by the way, right?
yeah, sorry everybody.
For,
I when it comes to insulting white people, I do it too readily and expect people to know what I'm talking about.
I want to make sure they understand the insult.
So yeah, when I went in, when I knew I was destined to maybe be a teacher, I knew I had to learn more about Black culture, because my foster brother was underserved in Mason, and it came to bite him when he went to Detroit. And so I started engaging in hip hop more. It also stemmed from me just naturally developing an interest in jazz. And so from
You and I, our musical taste is way too close. Like, you kind of freak me out about it. Our musical taste is way too close.
That's funny.
Because we'll both start talking about the Last Poets in about 5 seconds from now.
So hip hop came from like necessity. Like starting, basically, it was I didn't have any Black history that was adequate taught to me at Mason High School. That's one of the really negative things about that school.
Is that where that teacher just resigned?
Yeah, from I think North Aurelius. Because they don't adequately teach Black history in Mason schools. And Malcolm X went to Mason. That's where he did his primary school. He was top of his class at Mason, and we don't even teach that. Like, I had to read that in his autobiography, and that wasn't assigned reading. You know what I'm saying?
I couldn't make a step in Everett without seeing something about Magic Johnson.
Right. Yeah. So that's disrespect right away. So that's what I grew up with, and then realizing that my freshman year of high school, when Dwayne went to Henry Ford High School, like, so my mentality about it switched up. I used to be one of those, like you said, straight A white kids, talk very proper and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But when you come from poor people and you hang out with poor people, like, you gotta change. Like, you can't be that, basically. But hip hop was my first real taste of Black history. And I started messing around with writing rhymes and was terrible at it for a really long time. I'm now to the point where I enjoy what I do, which is a very self-critical person. It was quite a journey. And it's for me, it's all about taking the old and flipping it into something new. Like, hip hop is a postmodern art, which means we are not afraid to take the things that came before us and dismantle them and take what we like and use it to make something completely new. You know what I'm saying?
6 seconds at a time.
Right. But 808 stuff.
So let me just share a couple things. Yana said she'd love to hear your story in the Chronicle, so we'll hit her up, right? And Anthony Miller here has a question. Is the hospital liable for releasing a patient after administering a medicine, and why wasn't it overnight at the hospital? Do you know why that?
I'm not sure what kind of authority the hospital has, but if I had to guess, based on how Lansing operates and how little accountability with the police there are, that the doctors probably didn't have that much authority in that situation. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. All right, so a little bit about hip hop, some things about the Poor People's Campaign. What else you doing? Anything else you want to give a shout out to?
I'm getting ready for spring. I mean, there was a lot about the George Floyd marches last summer that were important and that need to continue and be built upon. And in that, because the Poor People's Campaign is all about police accountability, and really, like, picking and choosing exactly where we're going to defund the police locally, and how we're going to not only defund them but build a safety program that actually relies on our communities and is beholden to our communities. But at the same time, the Poor People's Campaign doesn't want to run out and say fuck the police.
No.
uh, yeah, and you know, um, it's 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 not easy getting everybody to work together, and we're working on
Do
so many issues. So to a certain extent, you know, there's some compromise that has to be done there, which
yeah,
is one of the reasons I also work with We the Free People in Lansing, because they are kind of like a voice of the youth here, that are pretty unafraid to get out and say that the police are wrong. Fuck them,
yeah,
murdering bitches. Um,
yeah.
you know,
Well,
which if you don't know, that's the chant. Fuck the police, murdering bitches is something that came out of the protest this summer.
yeah.
Something one of the regulars at those protests started. Terry, shout out to Terry. Um, but
Well,
yeah, so that's some context.
as you know, and I'm going to put it right out on air, we about 8 of our kids got tear gassed when and I say our kids we love that are dear to me. You know, Ezra, who I consider a son, Bilal, I love with all my heart. I mean, they came back here with tears and they were tear gassed,
Yeah,
and I gave them chalk and I said, you write whatever you want on the building. And they wrote defund the police, invest in black communities, fuck the police, fuck 12, all cops are bastards, all cops are pussies, all kinds of stuff like that. And why was that important for our youth to start saying?
well, I mean,
Or was it even?
I don't know. Somebody had to get out there and be unafraid. Um, you know, to say, hey, we're going to block the streets because this issue is more important than you getting to work on time. And that's one of the things. You know, Paul Birdsong, this summer, he was one of the main leaders of the everyday marches for George Floyd this summer. He
Yeah.
came to it. You know, he's a West Side blood. He got some other stuff going on, and so he came into it with some toxic masculinity and stuff, that ultimately wasn't sustainable in that movement, and he backed out in the fall and stuff. But one of the real important things that
But
he
we still
really,
have love for Paul, right?
yeah,
I mean, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Make sure
exactly,
everyone knows that.
yeah, and what, yeah, um, the the thing that was most important that he did was just take away that fear and give, some structure for how to interact with the police and with the city
Yeah,
in this issue, and show the youth that they don't have to be afraid because we're in the right.
that's right.
And so I think that's just going to make it easier from here on out, basically. Like, now that we know that, now, you know, it's just easier to move and organize actions now that we've seen it. We've got, you know, dozens of people in the city that have did, you know, over 100 direct actions in the year of 2020. So there's like tons of experience, with organizing street protests in Lansing, especially for how big Lansing is. Like, we got a
Yeah,
lot of experienced organizers here.
yeah. Do
Um,
you? Oh, go ahead.
and yeah, I just want to speak on the tear gassing, because I wasn't there for that. It was COVID. I was nervous. I'm staying with my grandparents right now and don't want to get them COVID. Um, so at that time, I was waiting. I waited until Dinah DeWald, who,
Hmm.
um, is another really awesome community organizer who just does that job of knowing everybody and pointing people in helpful directions. Um, when she posted about the protest, I think it was a few days after it started, after the first day with the tear gas and the car getting set on
Yeah.
fire and everything, which, you know, now that I've marched with everybody, a lot of my friends were there for that, and tear gassed, and, you know, somebody's foot was ran over by
Hmm.
that car that tried to run through everybody. Like, so yeah, I'm right there with you. The outrage at the city, is something that just needs to be expressed. We don't need to be coy about it either.
Right. So we're running long.
Oh,
and
yeah,
huh?
that's right. You keep a pretty tight show usually.
No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying we can talk for a few more hours, probably, you and I could.
Oh man, yeah, we could.
Right? Because there's a lot more. I mean, there's so much more. I think you are one of the most interesting people I know. I love talking to you. I love that you're innovative and you're ready to, jump in and say, let's give it a try. And I love what you're doing to make our community stronger. I feel better because you're here. I definitely 100%.
Yeah, I feel the same about you, Jerry.
But we'll keep running. All right. We'll get the show moving. We daisy chain the shows together. And yesterday on the show, I had Leo Brown with the Black Wall Street of Lansing and the Fahrenheit Bistro. His question is a question we hear a lot in entrepreneurialism, but in activism, it's really a great question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Ideally in 5 years, I'd like to have an office like your office, Jerry.
You can have my office right now. It's got a lot of bills associated with it. You get those too. Yeah. I got the coolest office in Lansing. I'm just going to say that right now.
You do, exactly. And just, I would say in 5 years, I'm gonna be still impacting the people of Michigan. It might be Detroit or it might be Lansing. What it's gonna be is trying to make schools more equitable for Black youth, because that's what I'm good at. Physically on the ground and increasingly in, the background, showing up and trying to create new policy as well. So getting better at that and then building out the Poor People's Campaign so that I can have more time to focus on that. That's kind of where I see myself in 5 years. And the urban agriculture ties into that. I totally undersold earlier when I was talking about city year and the fact that I ran the garden. That was probably the most productive thing I did in that school, was run the garden and just get plants to a lot of kids, hundreds of kids.
Have I talked to you about all the seeds we got yet?
No, tell me.
Oh, we got.
No, I'm gonna come over later. That's too big a conversation. I'm gonna come talk to you face to face about that.
When you see it, you'll understand what we are about to do, and you and the Poor People's Campaign is heavy on my mind. So
awesome.
That'll be a different conversation. We'll let everyone know
we've got
about.
A few other people to connect with too. I think we've got some connections with MSU. For that, we're obviously connected with the Capital United Land Trust. You know about that?
Yeah,
Have you had
I do. Yeah. I do.
Yes, the Capital United Land Trust is about getting land to queer people and Black people, Indigenous people, other minorities in Lansing, to grow food on.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic, but super important.
When you coming over? We're scheduling a meeting during the show, but that's all right.
I don't know. When are you free? 4:00?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll come over in an hour.
Okay. All right. So that's a different thing. We'll talk about that later and make some big announcements, I think. Tomorrow on the show, I have Missy, who runs Lansing Hoops, and they do fire and all kinds of crazy. I'm not crazy. That's the wrong word. That's an ableist word I'm trying to get rid of. They do really funky stuff. And what question would you like me to pass to Missy?
Yeah, for her, I would ask, where are the spaces in Lansing where you're going to find artists to collaborate with you, whether those are physical or digital or whatever?
Yeah. Well, do you have some of those? what spaces do you use to collaborate with, whether it's art, activism,
I go
just
to
being
my
a
buddy.
badass?
I go to my buddy Chris's couch, and we sit there and write rhymes all the time.
Yeah.
But more than that, in terms of actually finding real community and building on that, the Fledge is the main place that I do that. If not out on those streets with protesters, because hip hoppers gonna protest. Like, I'm gonna continue to meet more hip hop oriented people as long as I keep on doing what I'm doing.
Hip hop and punk rock, pretty close, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know that
I'm,
much about the punk rock culture. I'm a huge nerd for hip hop, so I can
yeah,
talk about that for hours. But I wouldn't know how to make that comparison.
yeah. Well, we don't need these leaders doing what they do to us. There's a war on the poor. The war on drugs is a war on the poor. The war on anything they've ever said there's a war on, it's poor people. We're going to go steal these black and brown poor people's oil. Every war we ever fight is a war on the poor.
Yep.
To me, anyways. Maybe not World War II. There's some very great things that happened to defend and to help people around the world, but not recently.
Yeah.
So, is there anything we forgot to talk about?
I'll just say that we're always building our working groups in the Poor People's Campaign. Like I said, that's basically my main job. Particularly right now, I'm working on setting up an education working group, because we haven't had a regularly meeting group for just talking about education reform, and a direct action working group, both just for the Lansing branch of the Poor People's Campaign, just to build alongside me and hopefully take a little bit off of my plate. Because if you ever see me when I've planned an action, I'm running around like a chicken with a head cut off, being bossy as hell. I don't even like being bossy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But sometimes I guess it has to happen. I don't know. We'll find better ways. We're all still learning, right?
Yep.
So, what would you like to take us out with?
Man, just respect that the land that you're on is not, it shouldn't be your land. And if you're not doing good with it and doing good by it, like, you've got some learning to do, some reflection. Here local, like, not only is this Potawatomi land, but it was fought for by tons of tribes: the Cherokee, the Sauk, the Miami, all sorts. And they were ultimately removed. And here we are now. And we've got monocultures as far as the eye can see. And we're physically and spiritually not doing right by the land. So just reflect on that.
And, oh, man, I'll spend another 20 minutes on this.
Yeah, the heavy one drop right at the end.
We're supposed to be the Great Lakes state. We have a large percentage of the world's fresh water, and we are horrible stewards. Quit selling it to Nestle, quit letting Enbridge do their bullshit, and quit screwing the rest of the world, because we can't think about how it should be. We can't be sustainable. We can't not bow our heads to corporate interests. I love you so much, man. I love your work you're doing.
I love and appreciate you and all that you do for Lansing. Like, what you do makes my job a lot easier. So I appreciate you.
Then we're symbiotic, because I feel like my job's getting easier. I was thinking about retiring once I saw you guys showing up.
Yeah, we'll see. We need you a little longer, but
I'm gonna fight till my last breath. We're not losing this war. We're not losing it. Thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'll be on again. Every time we talk, it's a good, stimulating conversation. And like you said, I'm just trying to be real. I'll talk the same shit in front of anybody. So anytime you want to talk.
All right. I appreciate you so much. All right. Every damn day, every day at 2 p.m. Stay tuned tomorrow, and we will see you later. See you, Tobias.
See you around, Jerry, soon.